Georgia Williams was born in Shropshire, England on September 7, 1995. She was bright, kind, and full of energy, and she grew up in a close, loving home. She lived with her dad, Stephen, who worked as a police officer, her mom, Lynette, and her older sister, Scarlett. Georgia was especially close to her family. They were a big part of her life. At school, Georgia did well in everything she tried. She was a straight-A student, head girl, and a cadet in the Air Training Corps. She had her sights set on the future and hoped to one day become a paramedic in the Royal Air Force. Outside of school, she loved sports and being outdoors. Friends described her as someone with a warm, infectious smile and a personality that drew people in. At 17, she was popular, well-liked, and deeply loved by the people around her.
As soon as she was old enough, Georgia got a part-time job at a local petrol station. She settled in quickly and made friends with her coworkers. One of them was 23-year-old Jaime Reynolds. He'd been in her sister Scarlett's year at school and was a few years older than Georgia. Her family had met him while visiting her at work and thought he seemed quiet and polite. Over time, Reynolds became interested in Georgia and made his feelings clear. Georgia didn't feel the same way and turned him down, but she didn't cut him off. She stayed friendly and civil, treating him the way she treated everyone else. That was just who Georgia was. As a child, she'd been bullied, and she never forgot how isolating that felt. She went out of her way to include people and make sure no one felt pushed aside.
Ignoring someone, even when it might have been easier, just wasn't in her nature. Reynolds worked full-time at the petrol station and told Georgia he was passionate about photography. He talked about wanting to turn it into a career someday instead of staying in his current job. Georgia, like her friends, encouraged him and offered support whenever she could. At one point, he asked if she'd be willing to model for some photos he wanted to use in a portfolio. Georgia agreed. Plans were made for Georgia and a few friends to go to Jaime's parents' house on May 26, 2013 for the photos. That evening, at around 7:30 p.m., Georgia left a family barbecue and headed out to meet Jaime and her friends. She told her family she'd be back later, and then she walked out the door. Georgia was known for being responsible and reliable.
Jamie's house was only a few minutes away on foot, so her parents agreed she could go. A few hours passed, and there was still no sign of her. Her mom, Lynette, sent a text asking how things were going and when she might be home. Georgia replied that the photo shoot was over, but she was going to stay with her friends for a bit longer and wasn't sure when she'd be back. She ended the message the way she always did, with 3 kisses. Early Monday morning, around 6 a.m., Lynette got up to check on her. When she saw Georgia's bed untouched, she felt uneasy. She sent another message asking where she was. A few hours later, a reply came through. Georgia said she'd lost track of time, stayed at a friend's place, and forgotten to message. She added that her phone battery was dying. That wasn't like Georgia at all. She was careful about keeping people informed and never wanted to cause worry. Her parents also knew she was meant to be going to a music festival and had her first driving lesson coming up, things she wouldn't normally miss without saying anything. By Tuesday morning, no one had heard from Georgia for almost 2 days. That's when panic really set in. Her parents started calling her friends, asking if she'd stayed over, but no one had seen her or heard from her. Her phone was now going straight to voicemail. Her boyfriend, Matthew, made a desperate post on Facebook asking for help. The message spread quickly, and before long, people were sharing that Georgia was missing. Her parents went straight to the police. The only solid information they had was that Georgia had spent the evening with Jaime Reynolds. When police ran a routine background check on him, it raised immediate concerns. In 2008, when Reynolds was 17, he'd received a final warning for attempting to strangle a 16-year-old girl after luring her under the false pretense of helping with a project. At the time, the youth offending team and mental health services had been involved to assess him further.
Reynolds' parents later told investigators that they had serious concerns about their son.
They also described finding disturbing images of girls in school uniforms that Reynolds had altered,
drawing over them and adding nooses around their necks.
Each professional team involved assessed Reynolds separately and concluded that he posed a significant risk. Despite this, no further action was taken. Police considered the matter, in their words, to have been suitably resolved. A few years later, in 2011, Reynolds came to police attention again.
After a female colleague rejected him romantically, he deliberately drove his car into hers. No background checks were carried out at the time, and the earlier 2008 incident was never connected to this one.
As the search for Georgia continued, CCTV footage and number plate recognition tracked Reynolds and his van to a budget hotel nearly 300 meters away in Glasgow, Scotland. Georgia was not with him. Footage showed Reynolds in a nearby car park changing clothes beside his van. Shropshire police contacted police. Scotland and Reynolds was taken in for questioning. He claimed he had no idea where Georgia was, but investigators weren't convinced. Given his history, he was arrested and brought back to Shropshire for further questioning. Even then, he continued to deny any involvement and refused to provide answers. The following morning, just after 5:30 a.m., senior police officers knocked on the Williams family's door. George's parents later said they knew immediately what the visit meant. Their daughter was gone. Police returned to George's last known location, the Reynolds family home, to carry out a detailed search. What they found deeply shocked even experienced officers. Inside the house, they discovered Reynolds' camera with a memory card that appeared to have been partially wiped. Whoever had tried to erase it hadn't been successful. What remained on that card revealed the truth about what had happened to Georgia Williams. The images showed that she had been restrained and killed inside the house. After her death, Reynolds photographed her and committed further acts of abuse, documenting them as well. With that evidence, the full reality of what Georgia had endured finally came to light. With that evidence, Reynolds was charged. Even then, he refused to say where Georgia's body was. Detective Sergeant Hopwood, who helped lead the investigation, later said Reynolds appeared to be playing games with police. Investigators began piecing together a timeline of Reynolds' movements in the music days after Georgia disappeared. CCTV became central to that work. One day after she went missing, Reynolds was caught on camera stopping to fill his van with fuel. At the time, no one knew that Georgia was already dead and that her body was in the back of the van. After killing her, Reynolds drove around 60 miles to Wrexham in Wales. There, he went to a cinema and watched a film. It was one of the Fast and Furious movies, the same film he'd been trying to convince Georgia to go and see with him. With Reynolds now in custody, police appealed to the public for help. They were trying to track his movements and close a crucial gap in the timeline. At a press conference, officers asked specifically for information about his van, explaining that it had been seen in Wrexham around 5 p.m., then again several hours later at 10:30 that night, heading north, through Queen's Ferry in Cheshire. That left a gap of about 5.5 hours, and police were keen to know where the vehicle had been during that time. Soon after, members of the public came forward. Several people told police they had helped Reynolds at the side of the road when his van became stuck. When officers heard the location, they believed they were finally close to finding Georgia. On May 31st, 5 days after she was reported missing, Georgia Williams' body was found. She had been left naked and only lightly concealed in a wooded area near Wrexham. Jaime Reynolds was formally charged with murder.
At that stage, it was still unclear how he would plead. On December 2, 2013, Reynolds appeared at Stafford Crown Court. George's father, Stephen, later said he watched Reynolds before the hearing began.
He described seeing him laugh and joke, showing no sign of concern for the damage he had caused. But as Reynolds was about to enter the courtroom, his behavior shifted. Stephen said he suddenly appeared quiet, subdued, almost childlike. Jaime Reynolds later pleaded guilty to murder, bringing some measure of relief to George's family. On December 19th, he was given the harshest sentence available under British law, a whole life order, meaning he will never be released from prison. He became one of the youngest people in the UK to ever receive that sentence. Handing it down, Mr. Justice Wilkes told the court that Reynolds would spend the rest of his life in prison with no possibility of early release. Reynolds appealed the sentence in 2014, but the Court of Appeal dismissed it outright.
Judges ruled that there was no basis to challenge a whole life order in a case like this, and the original sentence was upheld. In the aftermath, police launched an investigation into how Reynolds' earlier behavior toward women had been handled. As a result, 6 officers from West Mercia Police were served with misconduct notices relating to the 2008 case. George's memory has continued to be honored by her community. Local residents raised more than £2,000 to install a memorial bench in her name. Her family also set up the Georgia Williams Trust, a charity that helps young people follow their interests and goals through grants and partnerships. It's a lasting tribute to a young woman who was full of life, ambition, and kindness.
And who should have had so much more time. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant.